are the Mullet family. In this episode, we talk about our Amish heritage, how it was growing up. So glad you can join us. We hope you enjoyed this content. If you do, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We love hearing from you.
Welcome to my channel. My name is Mary Mullet, and we are the Mullet family. This is one of the dresses that I wore when I was still Amish. If you've watched us for any length of time, you may remember that both Marvin and I grew up Amish until we were in our 20s. And this is one of the dresses that I wore. I still kept it all these years. It's been now over 20 years since we left the Amish. I never was good at sewing, but my sister Esther is a great seamstress, and so is my mom and some of my other sisters. This dress was made by my sister Esther. It has the cape. This is what we would call the halstuch right here. And with that came a shats or an apron. So right now I'm ironing it so I can wear it and show you guys how it looks like. I remember so well when I first wore this dress. I was so proud of it, and I thought it made me look so nice. One of the things growing up Amish, we were not allowed to have any prints, and they had to be very plain, and there were some colors that we were not allowed to have. I was born in a very conservative, old order Amish community in Bowling Green, Missouri. And that church is still going, and I have cousins there today. But as I grew older, we moved quite a few times, and by the time I was a teenager, my parents moved to a community. We were still old order, but more liberal. We were allowed to have running water, no electricity, but we had running water, indoor bathrooms, and we had a lot more modern conveniences. This dress is actually more modern than a lot of old order, very strict old order Amish communities. As you can see, this dress has puffed sleeves. And when I was growing up, that was a big deal. Now in our church, puffed sleeves were kinda frowned upon. You know, that you shouldn't have it. It's too fancy. It's too fancy. And you can imagine, I have 5 sisters, and my dad was the pastor, plus he was an ordained old order Amish bishop. Us sisters, we would always be looking for the newest material that came out that we could make ourselves some dresses. We were always pushing the limit as to what we were allowed to do. And my poor dad, he just had a lot on his plate. People would come and complain to him that our caps weren't quite right, or, you know, your girls' dresses are too fancy. We were the preacher's kids, so we were supposed to be the ones where everyone looked at and followed. So I've got my dress on, And the next thing I'm going to show you is how we used to put up our hair. I used to have a clip and somehow I lost it, but I'll just use a rubber band that works just as fine. And what we used to do is pull up our hair in the back, put it in a bun, and then I would always put a net over my bun along with these hairpins. I would always have these hairpins. Every Amish community has a different set of rules. So I wanted to show you some communities, their coverings, they had to have a little bow in the back and they had little pleats. We didn't have that. Our cup, this is my covering I had, didn't have to have bow and it didn't have any pleats in the back. But this is the covering that I used to wear. Now my hair is not quite as thick as it used to be. That's because I've thinned it out some and I've cut it. I used to have a big hairball in the back. And how I did that was, I'll try and show you, if I can do it without a mirror, is I just gather my hair, put it in a ponytail. Then just kind of make a ball. Like that, and then I just take one of these clips, put it in like this. Now, like I said, my hairball used to be a lot bigger. Then I would just go like that, like this, cover it in, and go like that. There you go. And then I would put on my cap. If you see this little pin, we would use these all the time. We would put it in our cap like this, so that when the wind blew or we ran around, our caps didn't fly off. So there you have it. When we would go away, I would always wear my bonnet. It was very important. You did not leave the house without your bonnet. Now, as we got older, we went to a more liberal church where we didn't wear bonnets as much anymore. But when I was younger, you didn't go anywhere without your bonnet. And this is still the bonnet I had growing up. And if it was slightly chilly, you would wear your shawl. You wouldn't wear your coat first, but you would wear your shawl. If it was really cold, you would wear a coat underneath and put your shawl on top. But you would always want your shawl to hang just right. And I would put my pin in. This brings back so many memories. You put your pin in, maybe underneath so you can't see it. We were always trying to be discreet, hide our pins, make everything just as tidy and as perfect as we can. And then comes the bonnet. Because I was not married at the time, I was Amish, so I would often go find my friends. Often it was after church lunch. I would go find my friends and we would take a long walk and we would wrap our shawls around us and go walking. I just remember those times, and those are very sweet memories for me. The community that I grew up in had church every other Sunday. So we had church twice a month, and then we had an in-between Sunday. And some churches have Sunday school in their in-between Sundays, and other churches we would maybe go visit another church. But as I grew older, we had Sunday school at our church. All my years growing up, every church Sunday, we would have a meal. And it would often consist of lunch meat, cheese. On a cold day, I remember having noodle soup. We would always have Amish church peanut butter. When we made it, my mom would get this huge bowl. We would have like a massive bowl of peanut butter. Everyone loved peanut butter. And to this day, I love taking peanut butter to church. And if you're trying to lose weight, or if you're trying to stay away from sugar or unhealthy ingredients, this is not a recipe for you. But the way my mom made it, she would always put in Caro and marshmallow cream. And of course, with the sweet peanut butter, we would always eat it with red beets, bread and butter pickles. We would always have white and brown bread, and we would stack them together on a plate. And here I have it, Amish Church sweet peanut butter. O God, Vater, wir loben dich und deine Güte preisen, dass du dich, o Herr, gnädiglich an uns nahe hast beweisen und hast uns hier zusammengeführt, uns zu ermahnen durch dein Wort. Gib uns Gnade zu diesem. Welcome to our channel. And welcome to the Amish Church Lunch. Like many of you who follow us for any length of time know that both Marvin and I grew up in the Amish culture. The song that I just read is sung at every church Sunday. Now we had church twice a month, and whenever we had church, we would sing the Loblied. When you went to church, what did you have for lunch?
Well, this is pretty much what we had. Our day would start out about 5 in the morning, go out and milk about 60 cows, do all the chores, be in the house eating at 7 o'clock. And depending on how many miles we had to go, we'd be on the road at 7:30. This just started at 9. And being late was really a humiliating event. Even if you got there 5 minutes, if you got there at 8:55, you were late.
Yeah, my dad was always on time.
So a lot of times Sunday morning, that was a routine. We did our chores as fast as we could, went in, ate breakfast, and then headed off to church. And most times we'd be there 30, 40 minutes early. And that's what you see in the morning. All the ladies, the women go into the house, the men stand, put the horses away, unhitch the horse, put the horse in the barn, and then they stand around and talk.
Yep.
The Amish church services are all in German. This is the High German, all the songs they sing in High German.
And also they read out of the German Bible. I learned German going to school. English is my second language. In our house, we spoke a Swiss dialect. In your house, you spoke the
Pennsylvania Dutch.
Pennsylvania Dutch or German dialect, yeah.
And then service would start at 9 a.m. and they lasted 3 hours on hard wooden backless benches, and the benches were too low for a full-grown person.
Yep, we would sit on those hard benches. Then we had Atnungskme and Groskme, and that's a whole other story.
We'll maybe cover that some other time, but
Yes.
yeah, imagine within 2 Sundays, the minister's trying to preach everything that happened in the Bible.
Yes.
Sometimes it even want to start earlier than 9 o'clock, and
Yeah. We would
sometimes
go.
it would the communion would sometimes go till 6 o'clock at night.
So maybe we should give you a little bit more of an idea. What would you say? They call it Atnungskme. What was that all about? So is it twice a year or once a year?
Spring and fall, twice
So
a
that
year.
we had twice a year the Amish have communion. But before we have communion, we have what they call Atnungskme, which is in preparation for communion. And that is when we would go through all of our church ordinances, what is allowed, what isn't allowed, and so forth, to prepare us for the next time we would have communion.
Yeah.
And then when we would have communion, the ministers, there's quite a few ministers that get up, about 3, right?
It's been so many years. I
It's
don't recall.
the opening, and then the one who reads the scriptures, and then the one who has the main sermon. Now, that's for a normal church service. The Grossme,
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
But communion, didn't they have like at least 3?
They may have. Anyway, they start from Genesis, and they pretty much go all the way to Revelation. And it can last. I remember when I was little, our church, it went up to toward evening, from early morning till evening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in the community I grew up in the earlier years. Most of them were farmers, and so they pushed that they needed to be home in time to milk cows. And occasionally it would go till 5 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night,
Yes.
8 hours.
Of church service.
And so this could be a really long day depending on who the speaker was. If it was a gifted speaker and he was a good storyteller, the day usually went pretty fast. If the guy had a really loud voice and he animated the stories, I remember times when the whole day would go by and it's like, wow, is it over already? And there's other days that the guy was maybe a quiet speaker. You couldn't really hear him. Microphones, loud, PA systems were non-existent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And those days were just pretty long.
When you have communion in the middle of the church service, some person will go out and row by row, they will feed the people.
Yeah, they don't break for lunch.
No.
So the ladies are out somewhere else prepping the food. And then there's like X amount of benches. Let's say there's 50 people or so they can seat 50 people. And so like the oldest, the ministers, etc., those will all go out and eat, and they'll come back. And then the next group will go, and depending on how large a congregation was, I mean, there might have been 10 groups that went out and then came back in. And of course, the youngest got to go the last, like the boys. The unmarried boys, the unmarried girls, they would get to go last.
Yes, because when you go to church, it's all by age. The oldest goes in first, and followed by those that are just younger.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they're segregated. The men sit on one side, the women on the other side. Families don't sit together at all, and you always sat beside the same person.
Every Sunday.
Well, we had service
Almost
every other Sunday.
Yeah,
The Amish do not have church every Sunday. They have every other Sunday.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it's all about age. It's not like you just go in and just sit with however you happen to come through the door. It is all about age.
When I went to church, I had my spot right between the two girls, one that was older than me and one that was younger. And we would always single file into the place that was designated for the youth girls.
Yeah. And I think that stems from the Jewish culture about honoring your elders. And it was a big thing. I remember going to weddings in Cashton, Wisconsin. I had an uncle that lived there, large family. And I just remember it was always this big thing. And I was just a little tot. So most Amish communities, the boys and girls will sit with their mom or dad until they're probably 10 or 11, old enough to know how to behave themselves, so to speak.
Yes.
And it was time to go into the services, a wedding. You would think they could just lay it down and just, hey, kind of the older ones go first and the middle-aged and the younger ones. Oh, no. I remember times when these old guys would start to go in and this guy would stop. Oh, no, I'm not going to go before you. I think you're like 2 days older than me. There's no way that I'm going to go. And I'm like, good grief.
Yes.
Is it that big a deal?
And what I have here is what we often ate.
Yeah,
Bread and butter
sweet
pickles.
pickles and then pickled beets.
These are red beets, and these are some that I canned. And we almost always had bread like that, brown bread and white bread.
For the most part, it was, well, maybe.
For the most part,
Most of
the
the
Amish,
people bought the bread where in the community
Really?
I grew up in, yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe some, but I remember often it was homemade.
Yeah. And the peanut butter is
Oh,
the
yes.
Amish style sweet
This
peanut butter.
is the main thing. I think it is a staple in almost every Amish church service. Yep, and then there's the lunch meat and the cheese. And I remember sometimes we had schmiergas. The way I made it was a more healthier version, but I will put the recipe in the description. If you're interested in making Amish peanut butter, you can go check it out.
It's interesting because at our potlucks, sometimes we'll have this, and all the people who grew up in that culture who were used to the Amish style sweet peanut butter, they'll dig in and go for it, and then the people who don't, they're like, like what is that?
I've noticed that you either just absolutely love it or you don't really like it. And people who didn't grow up in that, I noticed too, they just, it just doesn't, they don't really like it.
So this was the only peanut butter I ever had. I was probably, I'm going to say 10 or 11 before I knew people ate peanut butter out of a jar. Sticky, stuck to your mouth, the taste was different. And we're like, the English folks, that's how they eat their peanut butter. I'm like, man, that is weird.
When it was cold outside, in our community, we often had chicken noodle soup. And in the summertime, the Amish often have large gardens. They had tomatoes for church lunch with mayonnaise.
Yeah.
And
apple butter is another thing that we had most of the time. Prunes. Prunes is something that some of the people also would put out.
Just plain prunes?
No, they were soaked.
Okay. Really?
Yeah, they were.
That must have been in your community because
I just remembered that there was these dishes of prunes. They were soaked.
Oh
they were
my
like,
goodness! They better have. That's oh my! Did they have the bathrooms open?
I don't know.
Now that would be some dish.
My memory. I don't recall very many times that we had soup Sundays unless it was communion. Then we had soups, but soups was something that if we had soup Sundays, I don't recall.
Well, we did. Not every Sunday, but when it was like really cold winter, we would have some soup. And
yeah, cheese was something we had a lot of. I grew up in Wisconsin, and we used to get it through the milk companies that we sold the milk to. And we hardly went to the store to buy cheese. We just tell the milkman, hey, we need a 40-pound block of this. And the next day he'd bring it out, and they would either deduct it. I think they had a system where they deducted it from the wage of the next month's milk check, or you could pay for it either way. But yeah, cheese was always plentiful at our house.
And another thing that we always had was tea and coffee. And I don't have it here, but often we had a tray of homemade cookies, like chocolate chip cookies, peanut butter cookies.
Oh boy,
yes,
the
we had a
chocolate chip
lot
and peanut
of
butter cookies.
cookies. Yep. And also we had pies occasionally. Mom, I remember when we had church at one time, Mom made pies.
Yeah, pie was also a common thing that we ate. Another thing about the cookies is, imagine that you grew up Amish and your cookies were always, except for the ginger snaps, they were always like the homemade. I don't know what it is about the chocolate chip and the peanut butter, though, oatmeal, but they were always like the bigger ones. They were homemade and they weren't, petrified and mummified.
Like, with all kinds of ingredients.
Like the store-bought cookies you buy are dry and hard. I was like, how do people eat these cookies?
Yes, that's true. In our family growing up, I don't remember my mom being very health conscious, but I also don't remember eating a lot of chips and things like that. We did have a lot of homemade breads, a lot of homemade things.
At
Mom
home,
baked and cooked from scratch most of the time.
right. Our bread at home was always homemade. The only time we got to eat white store-bought bread was on Sunday at church, or if we had a lunch exchange in school. I later figured out that store-bought white bread is just pretty low on the list of being healthy. It's not even good.
Yeah, I think I had more bought bread at home than probably you did, because Dad would buy it occasionally.
Yeah, like school lunches too. Store-bought bread was something we didn't have. Potato chips was something we didn't have.
We rarely had potato chips growing up. Yeah.
And store-bought ice cream was something that we did not have at our house. Every time we had ice cream, it was homemade.
We often had homemade ice cream too. And that just reminds me, before the snow melts, I would love to make some homemade ice cream.
Gonna have to hurry because it's gonna be gone this week, 50s and lower 60s. This is what we normally had after a long 3-hour sermon, church service, sitting on hard wooden backless benches. Bread, butter, peanut butter, cheese, bolognas.
Or lunch meat.
Lunch meats, yeah, we'd lather on, multiple layers, and I never was a big fan of the pickles.
Oh, I was.
Pickles,
and I should spread a bread like I used to. What we would do is we would either put butter on first, or then just put the peanut butter on. Then I would put some pickles on top of the peanut butter. And then on top of the pickles would go meat and cheese, and oh, that was so good. If I eat this peanut butter, I almost have to have sweet bread and butter pickles on top. And then just to put some cheese and meat on top of that. Oh, that is so good. I should just show you how I did it. So I would take a piece of bread and then I would take some pickles and I would just layer the pickles on like this. Next goes some cheese and meat. And there you have it. That's how I would eat it. It was so good.
So let me iterate. Before you eat, you don't just show up at the table and eat. There's grace.
Oh, yes.
So
yes,
everyone sits down and you don't eat until there's a silent prayer. And the bishop gets up, and the boys are always in the back corner, and then you hear this, you'd be talking and whatever, but you'd be listening for the cue.
Yes.
And you'd hear something like this: "Man, the dish frozen, but are still hot some gebet." That's meaning the tables are filled, let's pray. And it was a silent prayer. And then, of course, the boys are always had stuff they wanted to do and go out and play ball or volleyball or whatever. And we'd be sitting there, and there's grace after you get done.
Twice.
You don't leave the table until you pray again. And then he'd say, "If we're full, let's thank God." Well, it has happened. The boys wanting to go, sitting there for 10, 15 minutes, and the old guys are, taking their good old time talking and eating, and they're just not done. Just not done. And all of a sudden, they'll mimic the bishop. And everybody prays. And they go out the door, and all of a sudden somebody realizes it wasn't even the bishop that said it. Well, that stuff does all go on once in a blue moon.
Yeah.
Very rarely, but I'm sure it never happened that I never had it happen where I was present at the sitting, but I did hear about it from different communities, and pretty sure somebody who did that was not a member of the church, because they'd probably get reprimanded pretty bad and probably have to make a confession up front. That's just something you don't do.
My experience growing up as an Amish girl, I have so many beautiful memories. I would never trade it for anything. I learned so many life lessons and so many beautiful things.
Anyway, this is the first of a little bit of a few episodes that we're going to do about the Amish, whatever. So stay tuned for the rest of those.
So now to get to just a few of your comments.
Christine Schwartz, best wishes on your project starting. Hope all goes as planned. All congratulations on your little chicks. Your sisters probably called you the Cookie Monster. Thank you for sharing this.
Mama, you posted, when I saw the thumbnail for this video, I just had to make a first comment. He is the cutest George I've ever seen. Love your channel and love seeing your precious family.
The road in 1957. Do any of your children have Miss Horst as a teacher? Yes, they both do. So Miss Horst is the teacher here.
And she's good. We love her.
It's her first year. You would never know. She's a natural at it. Wow, we're just so grateful for everything she does.
For her. Yep. Well, this is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed as Marv and I reminisced about our life growing up Amish. If you like this content, please consider giving us a like, subscribing, and leaving a comment. We love hearing from you. Goodbye till next time.
Meine Gäste voll sind, dann mal still, halten Sie mit mir. All thoughts and all